Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we'll start with our birthday celebrations. So today, fortunately, 100% of the birthday boys in this case are present. We have Arvind and Shriram with us. So this is a May song for them.
Hey you, I know it's your special day. I just wanted to say happy birthday. I wish you love, hope and everlasting joy, peace that fills your heart, strength for the years to come. May you find fulfillment in all you do, grace in your every stride, contentment in all you have. I'm grateful for who you are. I thank God for putting you in my life. Have a happy birthday, dear special one.
Beautifully reflective, Srinivas.
Thanks, Yanks.
And thank you very much.
Happy
Thank you,
birthday.
everyone.
Happy
Arvind
birthday.
and
you.
Shriram.
Happy birthday.
And such a sober song reflects, I think, personalities of Meyer and me, as opposed to your
Happy
loud ones.
birthday, happy birthday, Arvind. Who else is there? Happy
I-
birthday, Arvind.
Thanks, Anu.
Thank you, everyone.
Happy birthday, Sriram. Happy
Thanks.
birthday. I came running.
I was wondering
because
about the selection of the music.
Yeah.
I know, I came because I said it doesn't sound like happy birthday music. So I had to come to.
It reflects the personalities of Arvind and me, I guess, as opposed to the loud
Now
ones.
she's going to do a reflection. on one of the
I think the song
You-
is beautiful,
Beautiful
Yanks.
song.
Yeah,
Very
Yes.
beautiful
Very
song.
nice.
really nice.
Thank you all.
Okay, now we'll move on to the next point. That is, it so happened that back to back we had an annual events, and last year, if you all remember, most of us at Joka, along with the non-book club members, we had a BITEC, one nice fireside evening.
Mhm.
And this year we thought that we'll have a virtual one, and then we conceived myself with the help of Milind and Abdul, who gave some tips. And we invited authors to come and then talk to us. So we didn't have any homework for a month, but listen to 3 different genre authors. So we had a genre on achievement from a film personality by Mr. P.C. Bala, who talked to us. And Gopal and Rishi, the veterans, they talked to us on management. And Ram talked to us about Bharatanatyam and how it links to our culture and our pedagogy. So and a lot of you attended it, which was very heartening, though it was a back-to-back 3 Saturdays. And we had a very good attendance and very good talk and excellent interactions. So I curated a 10-minute clip on what has happened for the people who could not make it.
Mhm.
So just sit back and then enjoy.
Mhm. Thank you.
And this was reasonably recent in a very successful movie. Again, it's a bounce back movie, I should say. Pet, I don't know how many of you watched. And listen to this. Very funnily he mentioned this.
இந்த எக்ஸ்ட்ராங்கிற வார்த்தை வந்து அது ஒரு மந்திரங்க. அது அந்த எக்ஸ்ட்ராங்கிறது நம்ம கரெக்டாக நம்ம வந்து பயன்படுத்தினா வாழ்க்கையில் ரொம்ப நல்லா இருக்கும். ரொம்ப சிம்பிள். எக்ஸ்ட்ரா பேசக்கூடாது, எக்ஸ்ட்ரா சாப்பிடக்கூடாது, எக்ஸ்ட்ரா தூங்கக்கூடாது, எக்ஸ்ட்ரா புகழக்கூடாது, எக்ஸ்ட்ரா திட்டக்கூடாது, எக்ஸ்ட்ரா அட்வைஸ் பண்ணக்கூடாது. எல்லாம் இந்த எக்ஸ்ட்ரால வந்துட்டு நிறைய விஷயம் இருக்குங்க. அது வயசாக ஆக எக்ஸ்ட்ரா உப்பு சாப்பிடக்கூடாது, எக்ஸ்ட்ரா சுகர் சாப்பிடக்கூடாது, எக்ஸ்ட்ரா நடக்கக்கூடாது, எக்ஸ்ட்ரா திங்க் பண்ணக்கூடாது. இந்த மாதிரி இந்த எக்ஸ்ட்ரா வந்து கரெக்டாக நம்ம யூஸ் பண்ணோம்னு வச்சுங்களேன், வாழ்க்கையில ரொம்ப 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 சந்தோஷமா நம்ம இருப்போம்.
For people who could understand Tamil to some extent, I hope you enjoyed listening to this. The concept of this is what he said. The concept of extra, if used well, can provide a good life. We should not talk extra, eat extra, sleep extra, praise extra, scold or criticize extra, and even advise extra. And that's why they laughed when they said, don't even advise people extra. Fantastic.
I think what he has asked, I can speak for him. He said, Bala sir, you like the Rajinikanth or rather Shivaji Rao Gaikwad himself?
Beautiful question. I think see, I have known him only as Rajinikanth, because only when he was launched as an actor in the year 75, the existence of Rajinikanth was known to all of us. So I must say I love Rajinikanth a lot. I admit that I confess that I love Rajinikanth as an immensely talented actor, and more than talented, more impactful actor, number one. But then as I started moving with him, I have several interactions with him. In fact, 10 days back, I met him, also spent about 20 minutes with him. So the individual, the person in him humbles me a lot, especially from this industry. You don't come across people who are so down to earth, so simple, so approachable, so accessible, so simple. And hence the person in him, keeps me really, really going. And that has only enhanced my admiration for him, as an actor and as a human being. So I should say started with Rajinikanth. Now it's a combination of Rajinikanth as well as Shivaji Rao Gaikwad.
We had an argument, to be fair. We've been working together for a long time, so we can have arguments and still be friends, unlike our current political dispensations. That he had a right glove and I had a left glove. He was very focused on the strategy aspects and what he has just explained to you, how to anticipate the future and be ready for it. And I was very focused on the fact that you cannot change more than the capacity of the machine. I can't take an old rose soap packing machine and make it deliver modern filaments and forms of packaging. So we said, instead of arguing about it, is there a way in which we can intersperse them? Because the real manager in the real world is not obsessed with one or the other. He'll get McKinsey or BCG to come and tell him about the intellectual part, and his HR chief will nod his head horizontally to tell him the other part. But the CEO or the CXO is a poor guy who has to put it all together. And all of you had that experience. I don't think that requires much explanation.
It goes without saying that all of those three are very important, because as we are going ahead 5 years from now, 10 years from now, the idea that a business is a standalone entity that just serves its shareholders and nobody else, and that value creation in terms of cash is all that there is to business, is a very antiquated idea. This was promoted by Harvard Business School. Both of us, Gopal and I, went there, and at that point in time, we thought it was, really an interesting concept, and we even followed it some of our lives. But the fact is that 2/3 or more than 2/3, Gopal spoke initially about the intellect side and the human side. There is no doubt that whatever the intellect produces comes from a human at the end. Artificial intelligence was also created by humans. So the human side of it and diversity is strength, because creating classes of people, when we started working in the late 60s, there were only 2 or 3 places from where the Hindustan Lever managers came from. St. Stephen's College in Delhi, St. Xavier's College in Bombay, and Presidency College in Calcutta. And then the IIT started coming in a bit. And then it was really, diversity was lacking at that point in time. And we were the first generation of people who brought in a different diversity in terms of our educational background and also family backgrounds. We came from some, poor families and so on. So that started getting sort of into the system. And there is no doubt that the future of business, if they have to embrace the future, must totally believe not only as things that you tick, not that, oh, I put so many women on my board. I think that's a very silly way of looking at it. By creating quotas and creating things by saying, oh, I did this, and here is proof. Here are the 3 things we have done. It must encompass, it must include the totality of our thinking of how are we going to serve our customers, which require all these 3 things to be done.
Okay, I'll hide this so that it becomes easier for us to talk about. Okay, so what I wanted to do maybe in about 20 to 25 minutes, and then leave us some time for questions, clarification, comments, and all of that. So the way this whole particular session we want to do is, I just set about 3 objectives. One is, how do we shine a light on the Indian performing arts? Which means this Bharatanatyam book is going to be finely presented and positioned outside of India more than within India. Quite honestly, if you don't talk about Bharatanatyam in India, everyone knows what it means. The second part was, this is one particular area which I found it very, very interesting, that I wanted to link Bharatanatyam to the way it goes into the Vedic astronomy and the pure sciences. And in the following slides, we'll see and talk about how this thing works. And then this concept of Bharatanatyam itself, there's a lot of link to the yoga. I mean, we know that postures in Bharatanatyam would signify how does it basically look when it is a yoga positions. But then there is much more to it than just the yoga part of it, because there is the Kundalini awakening, the chakras, the positioning of it, and then how it basically takes us close to divinity in each and every form and field that we have that. So interestingly, on the left-hand side, so I also leverage a lot of technology. On the left-hand side, this is actually the logo for the book. And this is, I'm also coming out with an iPhone app and an Android phone app, which I think should be ready by the Dussehra timeframe. So that is one of the primary things. So if you look at this logo itself, so it's basically the 8 for the universe where learning is continuous. You have a Bharatanatyam dancer where she's basically embracing that unity is going to be the way she goes about. And then if you look at the way the concept of the lending of a hand from the continuity of learning. So that means the synergy, right? 1 + 1. And then there is a +1 factor that comes in when you're trying to reach out to learn. There is a concept of love, which basically has to be the type of environment for this to flourish. And then the color of red is for creation, color of green is for growth or sustenance. And then there is musical instruments all around it. And then there is a part of a halo around her to just signify that that's the glow that comes into her. What essentially comes out of this is I actually used AI to generate this creative component of it. It took me about a week to think through what to write and what in the new world of technology will be called as prompt engineering, if you like.
Yeah, that is in a nutshell a brief jhalak, if you can say that, of 3 Saturdays, and which has been enjoyed by all attendees, and some of you might have seen the recordings as well. You can again watch them to see what these authors have to say.
Yeah, I just want to add a footnote to what Srinivas just shared with us, that the entire conceptualization and implementation of the LitFest was done by Srinivas, and that is really entirely to his credit. It's like a breath of fresh air for the book club. So I was insisting with him we should do something like this once a year, and that might be a tall order, but I thought I should mention that. Go ahead.
Yeah, now we go to the book selection. The reader of
But
the
before
month.
that,
Yeah.
before that, let's all give Srini a hand. Yeah, it's a lot of work, this whole thing.
Yeah, it is. It
Lot of
is.
work. Lot of work.
Thank you very much, Srini. I missed the first two, but I attended the Bharatnatyam session. It was absolutely awesome.
Mhm. I could say all three sessions were of the same caliber, which was really nice to participate in. So it was all wonderful.
Fantastic.
So for the July, we have Anjali as ROM, and we have time in the month of May and June to read the books. And she's wanted to give a modern twist to old classics. So she's offering 3 books, and then the write-up is here. And I don't want to spend too much time on this because we'll be communicating separately on when we are going for the survey and stuff like that. Milind, you want to say anything?
Yeah, just to add, Anjali has very carefully chosen these 3 books connected with classics like David Copperfield by Charles Dickens is the inspiration for Demon Copperhead, just as The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn is the inspiration for James. And finally, Geraldine Brooks, who's a very well-known current contemporary author, has taken her inspiration from a book by Lewis Alcott. So it's like a modern contemporary classics series based on the classics that I mentioned from earlier times. So it should be a fascinating genre to participate in.
And you want to speak about how we select the books, Milind,
Yes.
or later?
Yes.
No, if I may add,
Go ahead.
the classics, for example, by Charles Dickens or by or Huckleberry Finn or Little Women, what makes these classics fabulous is the way they're written. So they're very, very good. It's very good literature. The writing style is excellent. And these contemporary classics have also been written very well. So in addition to the storyline and in addition to the fact that it's rooted in today's age and challenges, etc., the literary excellence of these books is what inspired me to choose them.
Great. Thank you so much, Anjali. So just switching gears a little bit, we have been participating in this experiment for the last several months, starting with Ravi's Connecting the Unconnected, and then moving through different themes like Ramarao's romance and so on. So far, implicitly, we've had a debate among us which was centered around whether to take the old road with 1 book per book club meeting or the relatively newer road as we are doing today with all 3 books in play. And instead of just dealing with this dichotomy, Abdul very wisely has suggested a novel way of resolving this issue. His suggestion was that to infuse some variety into our sessions and to give the readers of the month a little more latitude, each session from now onwards, depending on the theme and the emphasis desired, the ROM should decide whether to recommend 1 or 2 or all 3 books to be in play. And if needed, they can do so in consultation with me, or if not, on their own, providing some reasoning for how they want to proceed. So having planted that idea in your minds, just to let you mull over it for a while, let's take your questions and thoughts up for discussion at the beginning of our open discussion segment today, so that we get to hear what you have to say about this idea moving forward, and then we'll take it from there. Okay, so back to you, Srinivas.
Yeah, thanks, Milind. So now we'll come to the heavy lifting, what Abdul wanted all of us to do. So the team is South America. So our session begins now.
Great. So yeah.
So
Hey, South America, Colombia, Ecuador, Guyana, and Paraguay. South America, Peru, Argentina, Venezuela, and Suriname. Hey, South America, Brazil, Bolivia, Chile, and Uruguay. Hey, South America, hey, South America. Let's kick it off with Colombia. Capital is Bogota. Directly on the equator. Half the country's in the Amazon. Just south is Ecuador. Quito is the capital. Islands of Galapagos. 1,000 kilometers off the coast. Pack a bag, then I'm on a boat. Hasta mañana. To the only country that speaks English here, the Guyana has the highest waterfalls, an incredible rainforest. Georgetown is the capital. Now down south to the next point, that's Paraguay. Located in the dead center, has the world's largest water reserve, and Asuncion is the main city. Pass through Bolivia to the mountaintops of Peru. Lima is the capital, but can't forget Machu Picchu. You know how we do. South America. Head up north to Venezuela, the country at the very top. Hit Caracas, grabbed a boat, then sail away. I'm off the rock, out past Guyana. Suriname is where I stopped. Paramaribo, that's what's up. The smallest country and they all speak Dutch. Let's cut south through the rainforest. We gon' end up in Brazil. Brasilia's the capital, but Rio's where the hub is. Bolivia, I passed through, but I came back and hit La Paz. I got real dizzy from the altitude and the windy roads that zigzag. Now I'm on my way to Chile, Andale, Santiago. Country's long, so the coastline's great. Plus, that you face. Buenos Aires, the capital of Argentina, that's way down south. Montevideo is the capital of Uruguay. Mic drop, I'm out. South America.
yeah, over to you, Milind.
Wonderful. Yeah, thank you, Srinivas.
This is so cool. Yeah. Where did you
Very
get
nice.
it?
Very nice, Yanks.
Yeah, it's
So
beautiful.
cool.
He always
So-
finds interesting things. Yes.
Absolutely.
Mm.
That is
So,
amazing.
I just wanted to say before I hand it over to Abdul that he has opened a brand new vista for us by observing that so far we had ignored some of the luminaries from South America by way of their contributions to literature. And so he's picked out some fascinating books, which, as some of you observed in the beginning, are also challenging, perhaps because of the style and the culture of writing from South America. But to elaborate on the theme and to give you a very nice overview of this vista, I'll hand it over to Abdul, who's the reader of the month. And he has brought together the three reflectors about whom we'll talk as they come up after Abdul is done. So with that, over to you, Abdul.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes, I should start with apologies for picking some books which were somewhat challenging, but I'm hoping that all of you are glad that you took on the challenge and stuck till the end of the books. So this month, we are undertaking a literary journey to a part of the world that has largely been outside the realm of our awareness. We have perceived Latin America mostly as an exotic place for vacations or as a continent of football players, but seldom as a center of literary excellence. But 5 Latin American writers have won Nobel Prizes in literature since 1967. In the United States, most people are not even aware of American writers who win Nobel Prizes. American writers are not part of the American consciousness. But in Latin America, writers are truly revered figures and are very often seen as individuals who gave these countries and the people a voice and even a sense of identity. They are public intellectuals who play a very active role in public life. Many of the writers I mentioned today were personal friends of Fidel Castro, for example. Miguel Asturias, Pablo Neruda, and Octavio Paz were all diplomats. Llosa even made an unsuccessful run for the Peruvian presidency against Fujimori. For this session, we have chosen Marquez from Colombia, Llosa from Peru, and Fuentes from Mexico as representative of the Latin literary boom of the second half of the 20th century. Great literature often comes out of societies that experience high levels of turmoil and turbulence. South America's is a history of 5 centuries of extreme turbulence, with wars, revolutions, and brutal dictatorships. The Spanish conquest of South America was far more rapacious and violent than anything we saw in Asia and Africa by their European counterparts. It involved the cultural and demographic genocide of indigenous populations and relentless exploitation of their wealth. In the 19th century, Simon Bolivar and Jose San Martin led the colonies to independence. But independence did not bring peace or prosperity to South America for a variety of reasons. Because of the failure to build durable institutions, these countries were racked by endless civil wars, occasional wars between countries, and extreme income inequalities. The Monroe Doctrine proclaimed by the US in 1823 and its subsequent, what is referred to as the Roosevelt Corollary of 1904, made Latin America essentially a useful appendage of the American economy. And most of these countries ended up serving the economic interests of companies like United Fruit Company, which is now called Chiquitas, by becoming banana republics. While the US was preaching democracy and human rights to the rest of the world, it was also propping up the most ruthless right-wing dictators in the South, like General Pinochet in Chile, Alfredo Stroessner in Paraguay, and the Argentinian junta, which indulged in a decade-long dirty war in which thousands disappeared. Meanwhile, the left-wing guerrilla movements were also extremely brutal, with Sendero Luminoso, that is in English, the Shining Path guerrillas in Peru, being perhaps the most nihilistically brutal as they pursued violence as an end in itself. The 2 major events that brought hope to the continent and perhaps set the stage for the literary boom were the Cuban Revolution and the election of Salvador Allende in Chile. Many of the Latin intellectuals saw the possibility of building socialist utopias based on the political models of these countries. But Cuba ended up becoming a pawn in the Cold War, and its economy was strangled by the US sanctions. Harold Jenin of ITT, with the help of CIA, had Allende assassinated so that they could continue to make easy profits in Chile. The sudden flowering of hope and its quick extinction formed the backdrop of Latin American literary boom. Literature was more than mere storytelling, but it became the most profound reflection on their societies, the only voice to a voiceless people, a critique of and a rebellion against the prevailing social order, and in magical realism, the only possible escape from harsh realities. Thus, Latin American fiction is more than storytelling. It's reflection, it's voice, it is critique, it's rebellion, and it is escape all at the same time. The literary works that constitute the Latin boom has many interesting characteristics. First, while the stories are local, the themes are universal. Power, corruption, mortality, and the redeeming value of love are the recurring themes, whether they are set in the confines of a military school in Peru or in the near mythical town of Macondo in 100 Years of Solitude. Second, many of the books have strong political themes. For example, Artemio Cruz reflects how the leaders of Mexican Revolution became corrupt and greedy. Innes of My Soul by Isabel Allende describes a brutal conquest of Chile by the Spanish. In The Autumn of the Patriarch, Marquez examines the solitude of power. Third, many of these authors were willing to experiment with the narrative form. The Death of Artemio Cruz, as many of you pointed out, has a non-linear chronological sequence. Time of the Hero has multiple narrators. Autumn of the Patriarch has no punctuation or grammatical structure. Finally, the authors draw heavily from their own experiences. Yosa was a student of the military academy in which the story takes place. Marquez was inspired by the love story of his own parents in The Love in the Time of Cholera. There are many other authors who continue to be the vanguard of the Latin American boom, like Antonio Scarmeta, author of The Postman, Oscar Hijuelos, who writes in English actually. His most famous book is Mambo Kings Play the Songs of Love, and Lara Esquivel, who wrote Like Water for Chocolate, and many of you may have seen those movies, seen that particular movie. They all deserve our attention. I hope this session encourages every one of us to explore and expand our understanding of Latin fiction. Now it's up to Sangeeta, Manash, and Monty to do the more serious reflections.
Thank you so much, Abdul. That was a very rewarding overview of the background against which this literature developed. And I think some of the writing may have become challenging because it reflects the turmoil that these countries went through, which were the origins of the emergence of these brilliant authors. So we are going to take these books in sequence with The Death of Artemio Cruz first by Carlos Fuentes from Mexico. That was the earliest book in 1962. The second book will be Time of the Hero by Yosa from Peru, which was published in 1963. And finally, Love in the Time of Cholera by Marquez from Colombia, published in 1988, and which also was the author who received the Nobel Prize. So in that sequential order, it just so happens that we are also alphabetical in terms of the names of the authors as well as the names of the reflectors. So we are going to start with Manash, then followed by Pushpita, and finally by Sangeeta. So with that, let me hand it over to Manash to begin the reflections with The Death of Artemio Cruz. Go ahead, Manash.
Hey, thanks, Milind. I've long been a huge fan of the Latin American literature. So that being said, this book was very, very challenging. But you know what? It was like you said, Abdul, it was at the end, we were really happy to have labored through it. And it was certainly worth the time we put in. So let's start with a quick summary. The book that was written in 1962, The Death of Artemio Cruz by Fuentes, is a historical fiction novel. The book is about Artemio Cruz, a corrupt soldier, politician, journalist, and tycoon. As Artemio lies on his deathbed, he recalls the historical and defining events of his life, from the Mexican Revolution through the development of the Institutional Revolutionary Party. As he prepares for death and the last rites of the Catholic Church, he compulsively relives these pivotal experiences. The novel explores the corrupting effects of power and addresses the tragic distortion of the revolutionaries' original aims through class domination, Americanization, financial corruption, and the failure of land reform. The novel admirably distills the history of post-revolutionary Mexico into one man's personal journey. that of Cruz. During the Mexican Revolution dedicated to the redistribution of land to peasants, Cruz is an idealistic young soldier. The successful revolution, however, had by 1919 been reduced to fighting between rival factions. His disillusionment transforms the brave, ethical revolutionary into a selfish and manipulative businessman who puts the interests of North American investors ahead of the welfare of the Mexican people. Eventually, Cruz manages to position himself into a family of landowners by betraying a fellow soldier and blackmailing his sister into marriage. The deception poisons his marriage. His wife and daughter enjoy the privileges and benefits his materialism brings, but they do not love him. And Cruz moves on to extramarital affairs that amplify his failures and regrets. Cruz inexorably transforms into a wealthy and arrogant individual, just like the people he battled during the revolution. He acquires wealth and power through violence, blackmail, bribery, and exploitation of workers. He continues to betray his family, lovers, and former comrades. Eventually, his relentless pursuit of wealth results in the death of his only son, Lorenzo. Cruz's failing consciousness relives the painful last memories of riding with his son, grieving for both his and his younger brother, more ethical self. So that was a quick summary. In terms of reflection, I found it very fascinating to learn a little bit more about the author, Fuentes. I knew a lot about Marquez, but I did some digging and was absolutely fascinated by the author. So here we go. A reflection on the death of Artemio Cruz would have to start with some words about Carlos Fuentes. Fuentes was regarded as a leading figure of the Latin American literary boom. Abdul talked about that in the 1960s and 70s, along with Marquez, Mario Vargas Llosa, and Julio Cortázar. His father was a Mexican diplomat. He spent his childhood in many Latin American capital cities and then in Washington, D.C., where he started to write. In 1957, he was named head of the cultural relations at the Secretariat of Foreign Affairs. Following year, he published this book called Where the Air is Clear, which is also a classic, by the way. And this actually made him a celebrity and allowed him to leave his job to write full time. His travels to Cuba during 1959 to 61, immediately after Castro's revolution there, kept his interest focused on revolutionary idealism. And that's the time when he wrote The Death of Artemio Cruz. The novel established him as a novelist of international standing, along with other stalwarts of that era. So Fuentes served as Mexico's ambassador to France from 1975 to 77. And also something which I absolutely did not know is that he also taught at Cambridge, Brown, Princeton, Harvard, Columbia, UPenn, Dartmouth, and Cornell. Fuentes had been called the Balzac of Mexico, and he himself cited Miguel de Cervantes, William Faulkner, and Balzac as the most important writers for him. The novel uses rotating narrators to demonstrate the complexities of a human or national personality. The novel is actually heavily influenced by Orson Welles' movie, Citizen Kane. And critics have said that the novel incorporated literary versions of cinematic techniques, such as close-up, cross-cutting, deep focus, and flashback, of course. Like Citizen Kane, he began the novel with the protagonist on his deathbed, filling the story of his life with flashbacks as the novel moves between past and the present. Fuentes transforms the familiar deathbed scenario of Cruz's life review and summation by his own creative use of tense and point of view. as Cruz's mind wanders and refocuses between intervals of awareness. Three narrative forms using three different tenses inform us about the different modes of his consciousness. The first person and present tense convey his immediate response to pain, disorientation, and of course, proximity to death. Cruz's unfulfilled potential is illuminated by passages in the second person and future tense, which convey his ideals and desires at different periods of his life. The first and second person sections are written in a stream of consciousness style. However, the defining events of his life, when his ideals are eroding, are portrayed in the historical form of the third person, the past tense. And of course, I shared a picture of Fuentes addressing Harvard University graduating class 1983, a year after we all graduated from IIM. So I thought that was interesting. So now to the last page here. As the end of the life story approaches, the reader is encouraged to empathize with Cruz's temptations and regrets, to mourn his wasted potential while condemning his sins of betrayal. The non-linear format and different narrative voices blend together at the end. So in summary, I found the novel to be gripping and comparable in greatness to the works during the Latin boom. While the long paragraphs and sentences took focus, and the non-linear structure and the tense switching required perseverance, I was transported on a journey through an important part of history and the inevitable conclusion of human frailty and the eventual death of ideals. Thank you.
Great. Manas, that was a lovely essay on Fuentes' work, and especially the way you explained the three literary narratives by using three different tenses. That tells us how you have to be really vigilant as a reader in order to track the entire novel. So thank you for that reflection.
Pleasure.
With that, let's proceed to our second reflection. And this is on the time of the hero. The hero referred to here is by Yosa, or Josa as the Spanish would say it. And Pushpita is going to reflect on this work from Peru. So go ahead, Pushpita.
Thank you, Milind. I could see a common thread across all the literary styles, and I think that's something that even Abdul referred to, and Manas, you've mentioned as well. And I found the same thing in this book as well, in The Time of the Hero. So Mario Llosa's own life experience with a violent and womanizing father who sent him to the Leoncio Prado Military Academy forms the setting for this novel. The Time of the Hero, written in 1963, was considered a coming-of-age novel as it boldly shed light on the conflicts surrounding race and class in Latin America under the disguise of a fictional novel. The military hierarchy and the secret hierarchies that the cadets, called the dogs, form, give him the structure that houses this plot. The academy was expected to make men out of boys, strong body, strong personality. And for most part of the story, there's less mention of the military education, though, in terms of training and discipline, and more of the violence and personalities of the background of the characters, which has now followed them into the academy, whether it was poverty, theft, sex, or peasanthood. I believe heroes are not created, but are born from within. While going through the book, I sometimes struggled to identify who the real hero was. The dictionary definition of the word hero is a person admired for bravery, achievements, or good qualities. None of these qualities seemed apparent in any of the characters. In fact, quite the opposite. Perhaps the title should have been The Time of the Rascal. The author himself was a political hero, and the different characters reflect various aspects of his own life and personality. In the oppressive world of the academy, a small but powerful group known as the Circle controls the illicit alcohol, cigarettes, etc., and gives orders to the classmates. The level of bullying, which we in our times called ragging, was almost inhuman. The Circle orchestrated thefts of exams, thefts of clothing, bullying the junior cadets, bringing cards and liquor to the academy, and had a voice that was feared by most. And what was least tolerated was squealing. Squealing about a crime seemed worse than the crime itself. A squealer was a coward. All the cadets had nicknames like Jaguar, Boa, Curly, Slave, Kava, Poet, etc., as a reflection of their personalities or characteristics. The Circle led by Jaguar included Boa and Kava. We never get told the Jaguar's real name, but he's powerful and violent and wants to control his classmates. The Slave, who is a gentle boy and doesn't like fights, is hated by all as he's not seen to be strong. The Poet has value as he has the talent to write erotic poems or narratives that feed the sexual urges of young boys. Kava gets bullied into stealing the chemistry exam papers to sell to the other cadets. When the Slave is caught passing the answers to the Poet, he is punished by losing his passes for many weekends. He asks the Poet to go tell Teresa, his girlfriend, that he can't visit. Instead, the Poet falls in love with Teresa himself and continues to visit her without the knowledge of the Slave, who finally squeals on Kava about the theft of the exam. Kava is dismissed from the academy. The Circle vows to take revenge on the squealer, and during one of the military exercises with loaded weapons out in the mountains, the story takes a bizarre turn when a gunshot is heard and the Slave is found lying on the ground with a bullet in his back. The Poet, who was the Slave's only friend and was already feeling guilty having secretly stolen his girlfriend, decides to seek justice for his friend's death. He reports all the misdemeanors of the cadets to the authorities and blames Jaguar for the murder of the Slave, although he's unable to provide any proof. The authorities are not prepared to have this kind of shadow cast on the reputation of the academy and decide to hush it all up. The colonel says, the Leoncio Prado is an academy. We're not going to have any scandals. Lieutenant Gamboa, the only disciplined officer, is transferred out to the mountains as his principles are deemed as an inconvenience. A clean conscience might help you get into heaven, but it won't help your career, is what he's told by his superiors. This kind of reflects the integrity or the lack of it that possibly was in society at the time as well. Reading The Time of the Hero was a confusing exercise for me, as it required some level of focus and concentration to stay in sync with non-linear narratives coupled with multiple narrators. Non-linear narratives are a lot easier to deal with in movies, as they are presented as flashbacks with characters that can be visually identified, rather than picturing them in the mind's eye while reading a book. The many narrators sometimes observe the world outside of them and at other times reflect on a chain of confused thoughts that are running through their minds, which come across as a stream of monologue, such as the disturbing account of Boa's relationship with Skimpy, the dog. The third-person narrator gives us an objective and impassionate perspective of the events of the novel, in addition to the voices of the characters. The fragmented conversations, the disjointed interior monologues, sudden connections between disparate events, all of this was supposed to create a dramatic feel. However, for me, the narrative jumped a little bit between different situations and topics too often, making it difficult to keep track of the storyline. It does, however, provide an insight into the characters' inner worlds and their personal backgrounds. It feels like a true depiction of the disorderliness of thoughts, as thoughts tend to be. Each of the characters come to terms with the harsh reality of the Leoncio Prado and the even harsher reality of death itself. There is also a mysterious character who's telling us his story in first person and is not identified right until the twist at the end of the story as Jaguar. Perhaps he's the real hero who believes at the end, despite what others may say, that he taught all of them how to be men, and has the courage at the end to own up to his crime, the murder of the slave. I wondered if the real person behind that name Jaguar is the author himself.
Thank you, Pushpita. You are a very good storyteller, even though I did not take the time to read this book because I chose another one. The way you outlined the story made it so clear as if I had read the book. So thank you for that wonderful reflection.
Thank you.
With that, let's move on to the last, but not the least, reflection by Sangeeta on Love in the Time of Cholera, written much later in 1988 by Gabriel Garcia Marquez. And he comes from Colombia. And like I said earlier, he was a Nobel laureate. So Sangeeta, please go ahead.
Thanks, Milind, and thanks, Pushpita, Abdul, Manis, for some very, very nice reflections. If I could say the theme among the books seems to be, at least from what I've heard from Monty, is yeah, they're all about that part of the world, but also in terms of being non-linear, confusing, not easy to read as being this kind of thing. So Abdul truly challenged us, and for that, thank you, Abdul. Sometimes it's nice to be challenged like that. Coming to what I read from the book, and my book, which is from the library, has got yellow stickies all over, which now I'll be peeling off when I go home. Love in the Time of Cholera I found was a captivating but very strange story of passion, longing, unrequited love, but also a few other things. It is set in the backdrop of Caribbean coastline, Colombia, and the cholera epidemic during the late 19th and early 20th centuries, even though the book was written in the 1980s. And at the center stage is the love story of Florentina Ariza and Fermina Daza that traverses more than 5 decades of drama and detours of the heart to bring the two characters of Florentino and Fermina Daza finally together. A young and naive Florentino is an intense romantic. He's consumed by his obsessive love for a beautiful teenage girl, Fermina, and he courts her through serenades outside her home, writing lengthy love letters, and patiently waits for an acknowledgement from her. Finally, after 4 years of this courtship, she says yes. But parental tyranny gets in the way, and she's taken away by her father for 2 years. Interestingly, at this time, surreptitious exchange of letters continue to happen during this separation. However, when Fermina comes back and meets Florentino, she is overcome by doubt and rejects him without any explanation. But much later in life, she does reflect on why she did this. And her sort of reflection is, it is as if he were not a person, only a shadow. And I also pondered about that. I thought perhaps this was to some extent true about Florentino. She ends up opting for stability, status, and maturity through marrying a successful doctor, Juvenal Urbino, who is totally smitten by her. Thereafter, the story meanders through 5 decades of the dramatic lives of Florentino, Fermina, and Juvenal. Florentino, who starts off as a lovelorn boy, becomes so lovesick that his anguish is diagnosed as cholera. After being rejected by Fermina, he is totally shattered. His predilection for love steers him to women and to poetry. The book does not say how many poems Florentino wrote, but certainly mentions his 622 affairs, some of which make you really cringe, and countless liaisons with women of all color, age, shape. It is intriguing what appeals about him to women, but he certainly does, because otherwise he wouldn't have so many liaisons. But surprisingly, he also inculcates loyalty, friendship, and trust from some of his relationships. And he relies heavily on women for his emotional survival. Still, he keeps the secret of his unrequited love close to his heart, and none of his relationships can replace Fermina. When the ailments of age start to creep on him, he realizes the passage of time since his rejection. Damn it, that happened 30 years ago, he muses. He continues to nurse his love and longing, secretly stalks Fermina by going to events she's going to, praying for Urbino to die. He also rises in stature at his uncle's company, loses his hair and teeth, and generally gets old, just as we all are, slowly. When he hears of the death of Dr. Urbino, this 70-plus Romeo shows up at Fermina's residence and professes his love again. After marrying Urbino, Fermina and her husband travel and spend some years in Paris. She enjoys her life there. Upon her return to the hometown, she realizes that married life is actually not as blissful as she had imagined it to be with Urbino. There is a lack of emotional connect between her and her husband. And in the eye of society, Fermina and Dr. Urbino paint a perfect picture of a happy, good-looking, successful couple who travels, socializes, enjoys a good life. But the reality is much removed from this. In today's world, this would be the couple who posts about the perfect life on Facebook, Instagram, while screaming profanities at each other. This picture-perfect life suffers a big setback when Urbino has an affair and leads to Fermina leaving her husband for a few years. Through the passage of 50-plus years, Fermina does have a few accidents where she mainly ignores him. He turns up at her home on Urbino's death, expresses his love. As expected, she asks. But with age, Florentino's style of writing and wooing has matured, and this reflects in the letters to her. He succeeds in befriending Fermina, whose response softens. They start seeing each other and a companionship develops. She agrees to accompany him on a river cruise, and this is where, after 55 years, their love consummates, and well, that's the end of story. My observations about the book: I thought the author's writing was evocative, lush, detailed, but as I mentioned, it was also hard and very hard to navigate, slow, and really tested patience. But overall, I'm glad I persevered. I can give myself a tick that yes, I did it. The vivid descriptions of the sights, sound, and smells greatly enrich the story. And I found the descriptions of the smells to be unique highlight of this rich tapestry. As an example, the scent of bitter almonds reminded him of the fate of unrequited love. Until now, I had never associated almonds to signify love. There's also a great amount of symbolism and use of metaphor. As an example, when Florentino is leafing through some of the albums, this is what the author says. He leafed through the albums of poetic festivals. He saw magazine photographs in color, yellowing postcards of the sort sold in arcades, and it was kind of ghostly review of the fallacy of his own life. That night he saw for the first time how Fermina's life was passing while he did nothing more than wait.
Mm-hmm.
I felt that Marquez created vivid, multi-dimensional, and very flawed characters that raise several questions about morality and portrayal of obsession. Toxic relationships, racism, sexual assault, child molestation are all portrayed as acts of love, even though these would have had disastrous results such as murder and suicide. And this is, I found, to be a repelling aspect of the narrative. Despite the serious themes, there were also moments of humor, such as the manner in which Dr. Urbino dies chasing a parrot up a mango tree, or this exchange that sums up the state of Fermina's marriage, where goes like, I think I'm going to die, says the hypochondriac juvenile, to which Fermina retorts, that would be best. Then we could both have some peace. I'm still reflecting if this book was a masterpiece of layered storytelling about messy yet enduring power of love, or about obsession and its consequences, or acceptance and aging, or difference between young love and old love, or all of the above and more.
Thank you, Sangeeta. Very telling ending. Since I read the book, I can relate to almost everything you captured so beautifully. I couldn't have done half as well in terms of the details that you have been able to reflect upon. So thank you for that wonderful last reflection. So with that, we come to an end of our reflections on the 3 books for today. And it's time for the open discussion. But before we get to the open discussion, as I promised, let's spend a few minutes on any thoughts or suggestions you have on what we outlined as the way to proceed from now onwards in our book club sessions. So once again, just to quickly summarize, the idea is to leave to the reader of the month whether to choose 1 book out of 3, 2 books out of 3, or all 3 books. And sometimes you could have just 2 books which are antithetical. Like Abdul's example was, he said, suppose you choose 1 book that is pro-India and the other book that is anti-India. Then just 2 books are enough for that session. And then we can debate and also get to know the pros and cons of how people across the globe think about our country. So that might infuse our sessions with some flexibility and of course a lot of variety. That I see as the strength of this rather fluid format that is left to the reader of the month and perhaps in consultation with me if they need any help. So I'll stop there and see if there are any thoughts, suggestions, comments, whatever.
Milind, my own view is to make it simple.
Okay.
Single book. I mean, which we were doing before. I know you. It may lack the flexibility which you were mentioning. But at least all of us read that book, and there's much more. Should I say? Many more people reading it rather than 1/3 of the people reading it. And then that's my own point of view.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with Sriram, and the only trouble is that if that book is kind of not hard to procure, right? If the one that we all vote for, which was the system, and so that's my only kind of gotcha. Is like I'm looking at the choices we've got, and strangely enough, only one of them is in my library, and it's because this James is so popular because it's got a great review, by the way, Percival Everett. And so everyone's reading it. So there's no spare copies. Well, the good news is it's probably going to be available in lots of bookstores and I mean, Amazon quite readily. So that's good. But anyway, that's I prefer the 1 book idea, the format, because it forces me to read the one that's chosen, Okay. Here I have to make a choice. I start reading the 2 books, all 3. Then I decide, okay, let me go for, Artemio Cruz. After 1/3 of the way through, I decided, man, this is too hard. And then I switched to the other one. So it's kind of like left me in a little bit of a limbo, having not read either. I had read again the Love in Time of Cholera before. So I kind of felt sad that
So I hear both Sriram and Shankar advocating the old is gold.
Old is gold, yeah.
Okay.
And it's a tortuous process of choosing, 1 out of 3, and you get all kinds of agonizing. Okay. But those people can read all 3, if they want to.
Yeah. Just the other aspect that I wanted to highlight when Srinivas, I, and perhaps Abdul joined the discussion briefly was, we were a little troubled that month after month we have the reader of the month pick 3 excellent books. and yet 2 of them fall by the wayside and just go into a reading list to die thereafter.
Yeah.
So instead, if all 3 books or at least 2 of them are given some air, then even if we don't get to read them, like I said today, we at least get a flavor of what were the books in that theme really developing that I didn't get to read. So I just thought I should share that. But go ahead.
Milind,
Yeah.
I agree with what you're saying, because ultimately, I think all of us have ended up reading only one book anyway. So it's not like we are, there's not enough time to read 3 books. I think all of us have whatever other commitments. But it does give you a bit of a flavor of what the other 2 books are. So even if we go with this new format, I think all of us would probably just choose the one book to read.
Sure.
You know,
It's only that the reader of the month would sort of suggest whether they would want you to read just 1 out of 3, or perhaps do justice to 2, or they want all 3 in play, and we may not read all 3, like you said, but at least we get a good flavor of all the 3 books. Okay.
Milind,
okay. Yeah, go ahead.
I also think that we should stick with the one book format, as I've said before, because for me, part of the value of the book club is actually hearing other readers' reactions. I mean, I can read a book review or I can read summaries of the books to find out what the book is about. What interests me more personally is reactions. And so for that, I'd prefer that everybody read the same book so that I can hear what individual reactions were.
Okay. Thank you, Nidhi. Yes,
I
Ajay.
also fully
Ajay, go ahead.
do-
Just let's give Ajay a chance because he had his hand raised. Go ahead,
Okay.
Ajay.
Okay, no problem.
Thanks, Milind. I agree with the one book approach, and I think Nidhi and I said exactly the same thing when you first proposed it. I think was it 4 months ago or 5 months ago, about the reasons for saying that. But having said that, I'd like to ask you, why did you come up on the 3 book approach? Is it your own approach, or have you seen it in any particular book club where it's working well?
To be very candid, what happened was we said, everybody is happy with the one book format. But after all, we have run it for a little over 3.5 years. And even though all of you were very gentle and didn't say anything about it getting stale, we thought we should preempt any such thought of, why are we sticking to the same old format month after month? It's been 3.5 years now. So that is what set Srinivas and me thinking whether we can do something about the reasons I mentioned, or why there were some limitations on the one book out of 3 format. Okay. And that's what triggered the discussion. And then as a council, we also chatted with Abdul. And that's how I came up with what we could perhaps try in the months going ahead.
And
But it's
also
The compromise solution I would suggest, though,
Ajay,
is
just to
in
add
that
to
case.
what Milind said, what we thought, rightly or wrongly, is we get a perspective of the genre rather than a book itself. So, like innovation, when Trivi suggested, we actually looked at 3 different canvases. Similarly, romance, we looked at it from 3 angles. Today, we looked at South America from 3 different perspectives and 3 different countries. So, I mean, at one shot, we are getting a benefit of the whole genre. That was, again, a thought. Whether it is working out or not is a different matter. But that is a genesis of the thought.
I think that approach works, especially when you had very close votes between the 3 books. If you had one runaway book, I think we should stick with the one book format instead of forcing people to read the other 2. But when you have a close thing, like I think Yanks on 2 occasions where it was almost a photo finish on which book was going to be selected. In those cases, maybe it's worthwhile thinking whether you have 2 or 3 books, as the case may be.
Good. Okay, Suresh, go ahead.
Yeah. So my view is similar to yours. I'd like a two book approach along with the theme. So one is for, and the other could be against. You'll have some kind of a debate within the group. You don't, I mean, if you use a 3-book or a 1-book approach, it's hard to do that. Although with a 2-book approach, you cannot do it in a fiction book, because you can't have 2 fiction books. One can be for or against what, right? So
Yeah. Just to respond to what Ajay just said about the voting pattern, we also felt for many months what I call the tyranny of the majority. So what would happen is one book out of, and the other 2 books would share the remaining votes as, let's say, 10 and 7, right? Now you have discarded 10 and 7 because 15 is the largest number, but 15 is not even 50% of the total number of votes. So that is the limitation of the voting pattern, which also came into our discussion a little.
I think Mayan also wanted to say something.
Yeah, go ahead, Arvind.
I think we can try for another 3 months the option you suggested, and you leave it to the ROM. Now, if the ROM wants only 1 book, then it's his choice, and see how it goes. Experiment another format for 3 months, and then again take another view.
Yeah,
because for an ROM to do 3 books, then he has to have a lot of time and bandwidth, and it's not that easy even for the ROM.
True.
So leave it to him for 3 months and then see what happens.
Okay. Thank you, Arvind.
Yeah, a quick comment here. I also support, the one book idea. So everybody has, we come to the table with a common frame of reference, right? Having read a single book, and much more room for meaningful discussion. I also think that there could be an opportunity to perhaps just pick an author. And if you just pick one author and discuss his or her works, then you could do a couple of books or even 3 and have it like a discussion on the author's style, the author's progression, evolution, the author's own journey, and so on. That's my 2 cents.
Okay. That's an interesting perspective, Manas. Okay. Yeah. Wonderful. Yes, Arvind?
Yeah, so this one result, unintended consequence of this thing is that when there was only 1 book, I used to definitely read it. Now, when there are 3 books, more often than not, read neither. So I've come to this presentation without reading any of them.
Yeah, it's the dilemma of the consumer. You go to the grocery store and there's too many things to choose from. So then what do you do? Yeah,
I did the same thing. Instead of reading a book, I watched the movie. So
okay.
I think Monty did that too. No,
Yes.
she read both.
No, I tried, but oh my God, that translation made no sense whatsoever. Couldn't sit through it.
yeah, but this Love in the Life, what is it? That
Love
book
in
by
the Time of Cholera.
Time
But I
of
think
Cholera.
what-
That was a movie in English. So it wasn't even.
Yeah, watching a movie gives you the storyline, but it doesn't give you anything more about the style of writing or the author or any of that. So the idea of a book club shouldn't be to just watch a movie.
Yeah,
You can just widen the book club to be a media club.
Sandeep, did you want to say something earlier? Sandeep?
Yeah,
When,
I basically was saying that the idea of having a single book is better and more enjoyable. And I actually wanted to endorse what Nidhi said and Ajay said. And then, of course, others also felt similarly. However, the proposal that let us leave it to the ROM for the next 3 sessions is good. We can go with it. But definitely, you start, I also, for instance, read all the 3 books for the first maybe 50 or 100 pages, and that's it. I found all the 3 books very interesting. And I also saw the movie which I suggested to Pushpita, and it was a disaster. But then it gave you some idea at least about the book. And the other thing I was curious, this is for Abdul, why he did not choose the 100 Years of Solitude instead of the book that he suggested.
That's very much my favorite book.
Yeah,
Only-
and that is why I was wondering why you didn't select that book.
Okay, for a very practical reason, I was looking at the number of pages.
Okay.
And that is by far the longest book, and I thought many people would just give up because it is too long. But your point is well taken. In fact, that was the first Latin American book I read long time ago, and it has always been one of the book that appealed to me the most.
I had heard this book from you. I had downloaded it. I started reading it, and then of course it's still there on my iPad. But one day I will hopefully read it.
Yeah, there are so many good books. For example, The Covenant of Water, which is Dr. Abraham Varghese' recent book.
Yeah.
And it is 740 pages or something like that. And it's too many pages in 1 month.
Oh,
But
but
a
it is
much
fabulous.
easier read. Much easier.
Fabulous.
So, so Abdul rightly said, I'm going to choose 3 books out of this whole wealth of literature, which all run into about 200 to 300 pages. And that's how he picked the 3 books. Those comments and suggestions are very helpful. But if there are any others, any other thoughts, please go ahead.
I think
I'd like to make a little. Oh, go ahead, Vinita.
I just wanted to say that, especially for this selection that we've just been through, I think the 3-book format was good because it gave us a nice, exposure to Latin American literature, which otherwise maybe we would not have had.
Absolutely. Yes. That's why the flexibility of the ROM choosing 1 book or 2 books or 3 books. Okay. Nidhi, go ahead.
I just wanted to make a pitch for choosing fiction, my usual pitch,
Okay.
instead of nonfiction. Honestly, at this point in life, I'm not in the least interested in reading about management gurus and how to be a better leader and this and that. I'd rather read a good fiction novel which talks about life, love, death, whatever. So I, don't want to read about the economy, don't want to read about what caused the financial crisis, don't want to read about whether the Federal Reserve did a good job, not interested.
I like
my
that.
side, I
It's
promise,
like
irrespective-
live in dreams rather than live in reality now for the rest of our lives.
Well, what is dream and what is reality, right?
Yeah.
100 years from now, is anyone going to think about whether the Federal Reserve should have done this or should have done that? I mean, there are things that are constant and things that change.
Yes.
If we focus on the things that are constant, it would be a little more to my taste. So
Very,
a
very
very
interesting.
personal pitch. A
Let's
very
hope the Federal
interesting,
Reserve is constant.
Philosophical.
On the subject of personal pitches, I mean, here's the scoop. Irrespective of which way we go, 3 books, 1 book, 2 books, 3 months, fiction, non-fiction, I promise you I'll still remain a member of the book club. I will follow the rules. Okay.
Good one. That's the motivation that keeps all of us going and coming together. So that's
Well,
wonderful.
the nice thing is we can continue to do exactly what we please, right?
Yes.
If we don't want
Yeah.
to read the book, we needn't
Exactly.
read it. And-
Exactly. Absolutely.
So in the
Okay,
last 4
guys.
months, I've read only 1 book, that is Shankar's book on Bell Labs.
Yeah, so it tells you how you can get rich dividends with very little labor, right?
Arvind.
Okay, so we'll take all these thoughts into account, and I think Srinivas and I, or maybe with help from Abdul, or whoever else wants to
Ishan
join
has been
our
silent, Milan. I think, which is
Sorry?
unusual. Ishan is silent.
Ishan. Okay,
Which is
Ishan,
very, very unusual.
you want to say something?
No, I was just listening. Very, very tired. Boston, we start here at 7 in the morning and it's 1 a.m. I'm a lazy bugger, unlike my wife here. मेरे से होता नहीं है. So I was just absorbing today.
Okay. Okay.
But I
So
think that
are you in
I
America
think
or
that
where are you?
Boston.
Boston.
Okay,
So,
wow. Have fun.
So I just wanted to basically thank Abdul again, yeah, because this South American thing is something which is
Yeah.
very difficult,
Absolutely.
and to choose and even give us other authors and things like
Yeah.
that. So
Yeah.
I think that, I just wanted to compliment him, and other than that, it's all good, yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. He chose a genre which was very interesting, novel, fascinating to me. So thank you, Abdul, again.
And also the geography, the various cities and towns and places which come up in the novel, some of them are quite small, and looking them up on the map, Googling them, a lot of interesting sidelines to reading the book, just not the book, but also what else you learn from it.
Yeah.
And what I found very interesting was burning, I don't know which Armenian papers to get rid of the smoke in the room. I don't know whether this is fictional or it is a reality, that to get rid of the smoke in the room, you have to burn Armenian papers.
So let's switch to today's books that we've read, and if there's anything anyone wants to say about the book that you read.
Just one comment: with the funniest passage in all the three books that I came across, among all the three books, was when Florentina proposes, Fermina says, "I'll marry you as long as you don't make me eat eggplant."
Abdul, on that count, I found it very curious that throughout the entire novel, never once does the author refer to them as a person with their first name alone. It is always Florentina Ariza and Fermina Daza.
Because the
Both
South Americans
all the
have very long names.
But why did he have to insist on using both the words all the time throughout the novel? Was intriguing.
That's the abbreviated version of their name.
Yeah, even that's
That
very
must have been the
abbreviated.
translation. Who knows?
Okay.
But I thought that was Latin American, because when I used to deal with some of the people in Brazil, they always said two names at a time. They don't stick with one, just like the Koreans.
Yeah, actually in Latin America, from Colombia, which is the only country I've visited, I found it very interesting that they have their first name, then they have their mother's maiden name, and then they have their father's maiden name, meaning the family name. So
That's
they
a
have
Spanish.
three words.
That's a Spanish
Yeah,
tradition.
exactly.
That's a
So
Spanish
three words,
tradition.
at least three words in their name, but it's very nice that they recognize both the mother and the father, not
Well,
just
Spanish has to have multiple because everybody is a Ramos. So.
You know that.
Very, very racist.
So in South Korea, everyone is a Kim or a Park.
But did you know that Trivi is also Spanish? His children follow the same method, yeah.
Yeah. So when I came to the US, that was 40 years ago, the US consulate in Bombay used to have two windows. One window was for all Indians, and the other window was for Patels and Shahs. So it's very interesting how that happens across countries.
So having read all the three books, a little bit of all of them, and also now heard the reflections, I just want to ask Abdul, if he was to choose one book of the three to recommend, which one would he?
Out of the three, actually, I thought I was always a Marquez fan, but I was very impressed by Yosa's book.
You were very impressed with which one?
The Time of the Hero.
Time of the Hero.
What was so impressive about it, Abdul, you tell me?
Because the narrative was far more gripping. At no point did I feel like putting the book down. I didn't have to struggle through any of the passages. Sometimes I had to go back and check, to connect events and so on. It was challenging, but the book kept my interest going throughout.
Because he starts from his childhood, and the childhood itself is so very interesting, And it's a real life story. It's borrowed from his own life. So which makes it.
Apparently,
I had to keep flipping back and forth to see who the I was. Who is speaking now?
Yes,
Who
yes.
is this narrator?
Right.
That was a
Have I
challenge
lost
for me.
track?
Yes.
Yeah.
It was a challenge, but still the narrative was very gripping. Apparently, the Academy was so upset. As soon as the book was published, they burned 1,000 copies of the book. Yeah.
Correct. Obviously, it was depicting a true picture of what was going on in that academy.
I think a lot of military academies might probably be similar.
Yeah.
The military boys' academies, which is what they always were. I think didn't they talk about English public schools and the beatings and the bullying and the slavery and all the rest of it? I guess they tried to prepare you for a world that was cold, brutal, and competitive.
Is it
I mean, it's
a bit
changed now.
like what happens in Mayo and Dune, guys?
I think the English public school is much worse.
I think it's, and also time, at that time, in that age and that context, I think now probably things are different.
No, I think that boarding schools can still be terrible, especially in places where there's no oversight or whatever, because the bullying and all continues. It's there even in day schools, but it's just that.
And oversight doesn't matter because kids have a way of dealing with, even when there's supposedly supervision, kids figure out how to go behind it.
But I think it's like which in any institution where even the military or a hospital where the doctors are in power, where there's power, there's always somebody or the other who will abuse it. So I think that's a human failing. That is, a structure in our human societies. You have police who also have that. But it's interesting to see in literature how it's portrayed in different ways.
Yeah.
It's been a most interesting discussion.
Now the power is now in the hands of social media.
Correct.
So it's no longer that much of physical bullying. There's more emotional bullying and the psychological bullying that happens.
Yes, and Monty, think about it, that earlier it was only 2 or 3 people who were bullying maybe, others. But here you have now thousands and thousands and thousands of people bullying one person.
Yeah.
So I think the mental pressure of that type of social ostracism or social pressure must be very difficult for children to deal with. And for grown-ups.
And for grown-ups. Children are now bullying teachers in school, and teachers are having to leave school because of the bullying, of the social media bullying, putting stories up. So, I think bullying is always going to be there as a way of displaying power.
And we haven't found ways of dealing with it. Yes, sorry, Milind.
No, I was just saying that Pushpita mentioned Mayo and Dune, and many of us have been at IITs, and all of us have been in a hostel or dorm at IIM. But there are still good teaching models that people even today talk about, and I don't know what is distinctive about them. For example, the Rishi Valley School that J. Krishnamurti started. A couple of my cousins were there, lots of friends have been there. And more than anything to do with ragging or hazing or bullying, they talk about being insulated from the outside world and yet being given a very high quality of education. So something works even in that environment. And we just have to...
I think Rishi Valley had a very spiritually enlightened approach.
That may have helped when they entered the place, for the parents to realize that that's the kind of environment they are putting their child in.
Yeah.
But often the parents were in some other country and the kids were there for all 11 years of school. And it was quite interesting to me that such a model could work very productively and positively.
In military schools, police academies, etc., machismo is glorified. And therefore, and showing empathy might be seen as a weakness. So people there is a certain normalization of that kind of behavior that occurs.
True.
Actually, you know, American public schools, high schools, not boarding schools, regular day public schools, they're among the most vicious places on earth as well.
Yeah,
If
middle
you
school
talk to,
particularly. Middle
even
school.
high school,
Yeah.
people are miserable.
By the way, last week in Texas, there was a school shooting. A kid was killed. That is a school where my son attended. He went through high school there. It was a rough place. Every day police used to come and arrest kids. Because invariably there would be violence during lunchtime.
And that's becoming more and more concerning, Abdul, because even in states like Georgia and Florida, this carry the gun kind of philosophy goes and permits people to carry guns to class, to school and college. It permits people to carry a gun to church. What is the purpose of doing that? I have absolutely no idea. It permits people to carry a gun to the airport. And so, you know, you could be standing in class teaching, not knowing if somebody is carrying a gun in your class. So that makes it even more concerning than anything else.
Anyway, we are
Thank you, Abdul.